Good evening, and welcome back to the Sleepy Night Detective. Before we begin tonight's chilling case, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from right now? What time is it where you are? And most importantly, what are your thoughts on unsolved mysteries? Drop your answers in the comments if you feel like sharing. Tonight's story is one of the most shocking cold cases in American history. It remained unsolved for over 2 decades, until science finally caught up. So, get comfortable. Turn down the lights. Let your mind drift into the shadows, as we quietly unravel the tragic and twisted truth behind the death of Catherine Eastburn, among the most recently ranked top 10 unsolved cases in the United States. There's one that stands out, so shocking, so bizarre, that it left the entire country stunned. The whole case felt like a carefully orchestrated game of darkness. Each move planned, every piece connected, with a series of eerie coincidences helping it unfold. The truth remained buried under layers of fog, until 22 years later, when advancements in DNA technology finally brought it to light. And just as the killer's identity was revealed, everyone, from the justice system to the military, from the media to the public, gasped in disbelief. A chill swept across the nation, because everyone had been completely played. So, what exactly happened back then? And who was the killer whose identity shocked the entire country? Tonight, let's step quietly into one of the most sensational and haunting crimes in American history: the Eastburn family murders. It all began around 9 a.m. on May 12, 1985, when police in North Carolina received a disturbing call. A man named Bob Seafelt reported that his neighbor's house had been echoing with the sound of a baby crying. He had knocked for a long time, but no one ever answered. He feared something had gone terribly wrong. Police responded immediately. Even before entering, they knew something wasn't right. Newspapers had piled up high on the doorstep, a clear sign the occupants hadn't been outside in days. And through the door, they too could hear the desperate cries of a baby. Without confirmation of a crime, they couldn't break in just yet. So they peered through a window, and what they saw made their hearts sink. A baby, lips pale, skin dry and yellowing, lay weakly on the floor of a playroom. It was clear the child hadn't been fed or cared for in days. With no time to lose, police broke through the window and climbed in. The moment they entered the house, they were hit with an overwhelming stench. A terrible, foreboding smell. They followed it to the bedroom, and there, they made a horrifying discovery. 3 female bodies lay lifeless inside. 1 adult woman, and 2 young girls, ages around 3 to 6. All of them had died from having their carotid arteries slashed. The adult woman was found naked from the waist down, with 15 stab wounds across her body. A later examination revealed traces of male bodily fluids, confirming she had been sexually assaulted before her death. But in the 1980s, DNA testing was still in its infancy, and this clue wouldn't be useful for a long time. According to neighbors, the woman was Catherine Eastburn, the 31-year-old mother of the household. She was a stay-at-home mom, traditional and devoted. The 2 girls found beside her were her daughters, 5-year-old Kara and 3-year-old Erin. And the baby, barely clinging to life, was her youngest daughter, just 22 months old. Her husband, Gary Eastburn, was a captain in the U.S. Air Force. He had been away at military school for a month, leaving Catherine alone to care for their 3 children. The lead investigator, Sheriff Jack Watts, immediately contacted the military to inform Gary of the tragedy. When Gary arrived at the comms station to take the call, he didn't even wait for the sheriff to speak. He asked, "Did something happen to my wife?" It was as if he already knew. As it turned out, Gary had been calling home every day, but for the past 3 days, since May 9th, no one had answered. He knew something was wrong. Normally, when a woman is murdered, her spouse is the first suspect. But Gary had an airtight alibi. He'd never left the military academy for a month. Dozens of witnesses confirmed it. That afternoon, Gary rushed home, and when he saw what had happened to his family, This hardened military officer couldn't hold back his tears. Under Sheriff Watt's guidance, he went through the house, checking their belongings. Cash, jewelry, and credit cards were missing. Police initially suspected robbery as the motive. At the scene, they discovered two critical clues. First, all doors and windows were intact. There were no signs of forced entry. That meant Catherine must have opened the door for the killer. So, the killer was likely someone she knew. Second, they found fingerprints and hair that didn't belong to anyone in the Eastburn family, presumably left behind by the killer. But again, without a suspect to compare to, the evidence was useless. Police asked Gary if he knew of anyone suspicious. After thinking for a moment, he recalled two unsettling individuals. One was a man who had been harassing Catherine over the phone a month earlier. He repeatedly called, saying he liked her and wanted to be with her. He even warned he'd come to find her someday. Clearly, he was a person of interest. The second was a man who recently got close to Catherine. Since Gary was being transferred to another city after military school, they were planning to move. Catherine had been trying to find a new home for their aging dog, worried it couldn't survive the long journey. About 2 weeks before her death, she found someone willing to adopt the dog. That meant this man had definitely been to their house. But Gary never met him. Catherine had handled everything. And the man making those disturbing phone calls? His identity remained a mystery. With no suspects and no leads, the case hit a dead end. But just when all hope seemed lost, a surprising twist would soon change everything. Around 9 a.m. on May 13, 1985, a man named Patrick Cohn suddenly called the police. He said he might have seen the killer. Patrick was a night shift security guard who usually got off work very late, and his way home passed right by Catherine's house. Usually, he never saw anyone on that road. But around 3 a.m. on May 10th, when he was heading home after work, he saw a white man walking from Catherine's house. They passed each other, and Patrick saw him clearly. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but now looking back, this man seemed very suspicious. According to Patrick, the man was holding a black trash bag, was tall, wore blue jeans, a black coach jacket, and a black knit hat. Before leaving, Patrick saw that the man drove a white Chevrolet. Based on this, Sheriff Jack Watt suspected this man might really be the killer. The earliest newspaper piled at Catherine's door was dated May 10th, and since Catherine usually picked up the paper around 6 a.m., it suggests she was killed before then. Neighbors said they saw Catherine take out the trash around 8 p.m. on May 9th. So, the murder happened sometime between 8 p.m. on May 9th and 6 a.m. on May 10th, just when Patrick saw the suspicious man. Jack Watts brought Patrick to the station and made a composite sketch based on his description. But without a suspect or a search area, it was very hard to find the man just from a sketch, especially in an era without widespread internet. Then, unexpectedly, the man in the sketch showed up at the police station himself. On May 15th, just 3 days after the murder, a man named Timothy Hennis came to the police with his wife, saying he could provide some information about Catherine. Timothy was the man who adopted Catherine's dog. When Sheriff Watts saw Timothy, he was stunned. Timothy looked almost exactly like the sketch, wearing the same black coach jacket and black knit hat. But Watts stayed calm, not believing a killer would so boldly show up without a trace. He treated Timothy as an ordinary witness and questioned him about meeting Catherine. Timothy said he met Catherine around 2 p.m. on May 9th. Since he was also a military man like Catherine's husband, she was friendly and even offered him a glass of water. They talked for about 10 minutes before he left with the dog. Although this sounded normal, Watts knew Timothy knew the husband was away and thus had the opportunity to commit the crime. Watts asked Timothy where he went after leaving Catherine's house. Timothy said he went straight home, then, around 7 p.m., drove his wife to her parents' place, and went back home, not leaving again. But what's noticed, Timothy had no alibi after 7 p.m., which matched the murder time. So he asked Timothy to leave fingerprints and hair samples, a serious steps and suspects could refuse, but Timothy cooperated fully. Watts then saw Timothy's white Chevrolet, matching the witness description exactly, same car, clothes, and look. This was no coincidence. The next day, Patrick came to identify Timothy from photos and picked him without hesitation. Watts decided to arrest Timothy. Timothy was shocked and angry, claiming he was framed. But Watts didn't back down and arrested him on murder charges. However, the case wasn't easy. Timothy's guilt relied heavily on Patrick's testimony, which made conviction difficult. Watts' team then dug deeper and found more evidence. On May 9th night, after dropping off his wife, Timothy didn't go home but visited a woman named Lisa. He left around 10 p.m., and no one could confirm his whereabouts afterward. Bank records showed $1,000 was withdrawn from Catherine's account on May 11th, after her death, proving the killer used the card. A woman behind the suspect at the ATM described a tall white man wearing a black knit hat and jacket driving a white Chevrolet, matching Timothy again. Timothy paid off his rent in full 3 days after the murder, raising suspicion about stolen money. 2 sets of unknown fingerprints and hair were found at the crime scene. One matched Timothy, the other did not. The unknown fingerprints were clearer and more widespread. Shoe prints found in the bedroom were 3 sizes smaller than Timothy's shoes, suggesting someone else was there. Timothy's black jacket showed no blood traces, which experts confirmed would be nearly impossible if he'd committed the brutal murders. All this suggested there was another mysterious person, the real killer, involved. The jury and judge debated for 3 days, finally declaring Timothy not guilty, and he was released, overwhelmed with joy. Timothy didn't blame anyone and even forgave Sheriff Watts and the prosecution, saying they were just doing their job. Watts, however, ignored Timothy's friendship. Later, Timothy became a public figure, inspiring a book titled Innocent Victim by reporter Scott Wisnant. He was promoted to colonel after returning to the military. But the case remained unsolved for years. In May 2005, Sheriff Larry Trott attended a cold case seminar featuring Catherine's case. Curious, he reopened the investigation alone. He contacted Scott Wisnant, who had researched the case deeply. Larry learned that male DNA samples were taken from Catherine's body in 1985, but weren't usable then due to technology limits. Larry hoped modern DNA tech could solve the case of samples still existed. Initially, the old DNA samples were gone, but after persistent searching, Larry found preserved samples at a medical school. On September 15, 2006, Larry called Scott at 2:45 a.m. with the new DNA results, revealing the true killer's identity. Scott was stunned and exclaimed, "My God, I even wrote a book about him. I must be the biggest fool alive." By now, you probably guessed, the real killer was Timothy Hennis himself, the once innocent man. The news shocked the police, courts, military, and public. They felt utterly deceived. Sheriff Watts seemed unsurprised. U.S. law stated someone acquitted in a second trial couldn't be retried, but military courts could still try active service members. Timothy, however, had retired with a sergeant rank, complicating things. Then, Commander John Wayne came up with a plan. On September 26, 2006, Timothy received a letter ordering him back to active duty within 30 days. Timothy happily returned, thinking the Army needed him. But after re-enlisting, he was immediately charged with triple murder in military court. Timothy kept denying guilt and raised doubts about the evidence, like mysterious fingerprints, shoe prints, and no blood on the jacket. Despite his denials, the prosecution couldn't conclusively prove his guilt, and the trial dragged on. At 64, Timothy knew this would be a long wait. The court promised no death penalty and good prison conditions in exchange for a confession. Eventually, Timothy confessed and revealed the whole story. From the first moment he saw Catherine, he was obsessed. On May 9th, he left his lover's house, came to Catherine's, lied about the dog's emergency to get in, then assaulted and murdered the family. The 22-month-old baby survived because she stayed in the toy room and never came out. Timothy cleaned up fingerprints and shoe prints but left some traces. Knowing as the dog's adopter, he couldn't hide visiting the house. To avoid suspicion as the sole suspect, he spread rumors in bars that the house was empty with lots of cash and left a spare key in a flower pot to mislead police. The black jacket had no blood because he bought an identical one afterward and aged it manually. The provocative letter from Mr. X was a fake he wrote and had a friend mailed to prison to get a retrial. All doubts were cleared. Timothy was a skilled liar and manipulator. If not for advances in forensic science, he might have gotten away with it. And now, as your eyes grow heavier and your breath softens, I ask you once more, where are you listening from tonight? What time is it by your clock? And what do you make of this case? Was justice truly served? Or did someone slip through the cracks once again? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every one. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and sleep well, dear detective.